I'm just trying not to fuck it up as I finish it off. And if there's anything else that I can give you feedback-wise that I notice that maybe your ears are blind to after being in the weeds on the mix or anything else, then I'll let you know. But that's actually pretty infrequent. It's usually like, I love it. I love what I hear when I get it, and I'm trying to finish it off without doing too much to fuck it up.
Hey humans, coming up is a conversation with my mastering engineer, James Quesada. Because we are friends in real life, it is a very flowy conversation, and it gets into some of the history of how Made on Tape came to be. And besides that, we go into philosophies and techniques, and conversation ensues. Anyway, I love him. He's the best. Here's James Quesada.
Hello, and thanks for having me, Chris.
People, whether they know it or not, they don't, unless they read the liner notes and everything, which I put on all the videos and all the music and everything, they would see this name that's appeared on literally every single Made on Tape track, release, and it's James Quesada. And you are the mastermind of the master.
A gross overstatement, but I do appreciate being in the liner notes, so thank you.
I think it'd be fun to just like go chronological, like for the people watching, because the kind of what I think that this video might be helpful for is releasing cassette music in the digital age. It has to be mastered, and because most people aren't recording cassettes and mailing them or handing them out on the street or things like that. So we do live in the 21st century, regardless of what people think when they see my channel. All the music has to be hit specs and be able to be released on Spotify and all this stuff. But again, chronologically, starting from the beginning, Made on Tape as an inception was formed in your kitchen.
Yes. But really, I wasn't there.
And you weren't there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so was Serious Gear, for anybody who's seen the Serious Gear shirts or that channel.
Wow, right away. Tons of presents.
We had a lot of really nice brainstorm sessions in that kitchen in Astoria, and I wasn't there for the one that led to Made on Tape, but I know a lot of great ideas have come out of there. What was the conversation? Were you kicking around a YouTube channel to begin with, or was it more just how to use the Tascam?
If I'm repeating myself for anyone who's heard this, or if you haven't, like, how did this channel start? In 2019, we were all into music production. We were working out of Greenpoint Pencil Factory recording studio. And I was getting really into Sylvia Massey and her unusual techniques. And she does this really cool thing where she takes one of those shoebox cassette recorders, and it's a great drum limiter sound. And I called up my dad one day and I was like, hey, do you have anything like clunky like that lying around back in Metro Detroit? And he was like, no, but I have that, literally that. Mm-hmm. And I had never known it existed. And fast forward, if you guys are familiar with the timeline, something happened in March 2020.
Yeah.
Something kind of global and big.
Global inspiration.
It's big. It's an inspiring moment. But like literally a month or two before is when this happened. It was basically just the idea to, I'm going to record stuff on this and just release it on YouTube. And that was all that it was. And it's Made on Tape.
But what was the conversation? Do you remember the
brainstorming
thread? Yeah, that led to it.
Colin might have insight.
You had this machine and you wanted to learn how to use it. Your devices, you got the Porta Studio, you got the TIAC, and you got the TR-505, and you're like, I'm just going to make videos to learn how to do this, and like in real time. And then we were throwing out ideas, and then you happened to say the phrase Made on Tape, and I was like, that's the name.
You also hadn't really done video content either, right? Like, were you already doing some dabbling?
I had helped. I got my first like DSLR camera, a Canon 80D. I didn't realize how quickly we were going to turn on me. I wanted to talk to you.
We got to start there. You said go chronologically.
That's
so really,
true.
because really, I guess I'm spoiling the purpose of the question, but I'm now realizing that, oh, wow, you delved into using a tool that was very experimental in the sense that you didn't know how to use it. You were just going to figure it out and document the process. But you also didn't have a lot of experience with camera gear before that. So you were really jumping into two pretty major rabbit holes at the same time.
The camera stuff I did a little bit of. Colin Stanley has some great projects that I helped film music videos for. I had a project called Working Flakes. I used a camera a lot for that kind of stuff. So but like the pointing the camera at yourself and doing the YouTube thing, yeah, I never done that once in my life.
Yeah. So
I don't like looking at cameras.
Awkward.
Yeah. It is awkward. It's weird.
No, that's cool though. I really respect that. I really respect the mission statement of Made on Tape of exploring creativity within limits, and also your willingness to dive into the unknown and put a spotlight on the process of figuring something out and having fun with that, as opposed to hiding what it looks like to not know what you're doing and learn as you go.
You just hit the nail on the head. I should put that in the top banner. That is kind of the ethos of the whole channel. Like, do something new and don't worry about f***ing it up.
Yeah.
Just show and like putting that on yourself to show the world,
Yeah.
But,
YouTube is for the world.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
How did you get into mastering? Let's start there.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think I was just kind of helping you guys out at the recording studio at Pencil Factory. I was starting to get interested in audio tools, being new to New York and coming from an improv background where I'm used to being able to put anything I want on stage. And improv doesn't use any like costumes or props, so it's very like open to the imagination, and it's just a lot tougher to do that here than in New York than it used to be in Detroit. And I was running into a lot of limitations of like renting space and organizing schedules and stuff. So what I wanted was a medium to put my creativity into that had the same kind of openness to it as an improv stage, and audio had that appeal for, podcast, audio sketches, audio drama kind of stuff. So I was starting to learn sound design and voiceover and getting creative with underscore and just basic mixing and mastering for those kinds of projects, for conversational podcasts and also some sketch ideas and parody songs and stuff.
So you crash your car on the way to court.
And then eventually I think it was, hey, we just need another set of ears on this, and I'm about to do a series of songs. Do you think you could do the mastering on it? I think that's how it happened.
James, for the audience, is a textbook example of an autodidact. Is that what we call it? Someone who takes on something new, like head on. And that's something everyone around you respects about you. Because not only do you take it on and learn it quickly and very, very well. There's something else that you said that is the thing that everyone, why it's good to have a relationship with a mastering engineer. A second set of ears.
Yeah.
It's like the last line of defense, preferably the best ears. For everyone who's been following me, they know I've had ear surgery, I have otosclerosis. I wouldn't call my ears very good. Probably bad.
It's the stuff in between the ears that really matters. And that's where you shine.
There.
That's where you shine.
There's not much there either. Everyone should have a mastering engineer to listen. That's what we needed. That's what we thought. So I started making music and sending it to you.
Yeah, again, I think that the idea just was that we were indie, low, no budget, and we were just kind of like, well, what are the roles that are needed? But another role is mastering.
I mean, it's part of the ethos of not just this channel, but being a musician from our generation and younger. It's kind of that like. That's kind of why I think it's important to talk to you and talk some of this stuff out, because everyone's doing everything.
Yeah.
Everyone's for the and music production, which now includes filming your own videos and stuff like that. Like a lot of people wear a lot of hats, and it's always, oh, what am I trying to say? I'm just yeah, you're right. Like in a bygone era, people don't usually start in mastering.
Yeah.
And if they do, I mean, there's a handful of world-class mastering engineers who have crazy rooms and awesome setups, but we have the tools now, in our computer.
Yeah. To like literally reverse engineer things. But anyway, it's again, I think along lines with your mission statement where you just like do what's needed and you figure it out. So, and I think that that's common across different disciplines too. Cause I know in like acting, or if you're going to put together a film project or web series or even stage, it's just like, well, we need a coach. And it's like, well, I could be that, or we need a director, or we need someone to be in charge of the lighting. It's just like, you're just like, okay, well, what's needed and can I do it? You start a band, it's like, can I sing and songwrite? Can I play piano? I'll do, whatever. Like, what do you bring to the table? What are you willing to learn to bring something cool and creative to life?
That's again a great lesson. And so now, like, here we are. That was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
At this point, almost 4.5. And fast forward, you are. We're in Miratone Studios, and you work out of here, and you've mastered a wide range of types of things. I've seen you do like film or TV to music to podcasts, and so you have a huge breadth of experience. And so I'm sure my audience is curious if there is anything about mastering, like the cassette recordings I send you, that's different, challenging, or what kind of if we can talk broadly about approaches or specifically, I don't know, we could go specifics if you want.
Sure. Definitely there's different things along with mastering your projects that I don't think I was really acutely aware of when we were first starting to work on it, because I was doing podcast and some video audio. I was recording my own voiceover for stuff, and I had done like some comedy projects, but like I really didn't have that kind of variety of stuff to work on, so I didn't really know at the time what was so different about your process or getting your tracks to work on. But in retrospect, definitely the idea that you're working off of fewer tracks and summed stems from the analog recording process. So even if there was something where I'm like, hey, that, this maybe the hi-hat or the hi-hat is a little hot. You're like, well, all the drums are on one track, or, something like that. Or
like I had baked in the early days, I did that ping-ponging within the tracks. So like, it would get to a point where track 4 might have drums, bass, and guitar all baked into it.
I think that was a good challenge for me to begin with, because it's like, I can't just give you the feedback that, hey, can we maybe bring that down? Because as I'm raising the levels on it, it's starting to really pop out more. It's like, okay, well, I actually do have to do maybe a little more than actually a mastering engineer should do to kind of give some attenuation to certain frequencies, because those levels are baked in as much as they are. So sometimes that would be a good challenge for me and be a different challenge than I would have now, where it's just like everything's on its own track for the most part. Typically in like a more digital world, or anything that we record analog in this studio, we have enough tracks to dedicate individual. We do a lot of overdubbing, so that's a lot more control over the mix in relationship to the master. That being said, another one of the main things that is specific to you and matters a lot to the mastering process is that you are a great mixer. Like you know what you're doing. You're a musician. You are multi-instrumental. You were pouring just as much time into learning the engineering and the mixing process as anyone else on the team. And so when I would get your mixes, it would sound really good to begin with. And so one of the things that I learned through that process, working with on your stuff, that I still say to people today when they ask me about mastering, is that I consider it my job, if the mix is good, to just not fuck it up. Bring it to levels, give a little accentuation to the things that I like, make sure that nothing is kind of standing out in a negative way as you bring it up. But there's very little kind of just balancing the plate as you raise things, the gain staging. I'm just trying not to fuck it up as I finish it off. And if there's anything else that I can give you feedback wise, that I notice that maybe your ears are blind to after being in the weeds on the mix or anything else, then I'll let you know. But that's actually pretty infrequent. It's usually like, I love it. I love what I hear when I get it. And I'm trying to finish it off without doing too much to fuck it up.
That's kind of how I mix also.
Yeah.
just the instrument. I mean, and when I think of the earlier made on tape recordings, I mean, we were both learning. I mean, things were spiked. They were not that great. They were, you have very kind words and I appreciate it. But, some of those early mixes are, because of that process of learning, I was not overcommitting, but like committing to this idea of I'm going to make it all entirely inside the 4-track, and that's a learning curve. So, you can go back and listen to those recordings, and, I would have probably mixed them differently today.
Yeah, right. Totally understandable. But I guess a couple things in no particular order that I'll say about the mastering process. One I already touched on, which is just in a large way, if the mix is good, it's just bringing things up to distribution levels without fucking it up or doing too much or trying to get fancy with it. I like to think about that in an analogy of like a photo. When people go to like have a really good photo and then they, or like a headshot or a professional photo or something, and then take it to Instagram and try to put it through like filters and stuff. And it's like the photo's really good. And you might be like, if you try to do too much with it in the final stages before sharing it with the world, you might be like, ooh, this filter looks cool or stylized or whatever. And in the moment you're like, that made it better. But then you post it and then a day or a week later you look back and you're like, why is it so orange? Like, why did I go crazy with saturation or whatever contrast? And all of a sudden in retrospect, it's like, oh, it's a fun thing to do to it, but did it really make it better? Like that's kind of the, I think, more relatable analogy to like a different medium of photos. The other thing is that a big role of a mastering engineer is to be that additional set of ears. I think if I had to, in a modern era, say that there's one most important thing about mastering, it is being an additional set of ears to give feedback. Because you can mix and master in the same process. And some people are really good at that. And some people, because of how much the production world has evolved, some people consider them the same process. Just like I can do it and, I can take a rest 24 hours later, come back and make sure I didn't do anything too big or miss anything that I wasn't paying attention to the day before. But even then, you get really in the weeds with record, especially if you're the one recording it and you're mixing it and you're mastering it, you're going to end up with some kind of audio blind spots or that you're not maybe thinking about. And you get your first audience on it could be a mastering engineer who's like, oh man, love this about the guitar. I let me know what you think about just kind of giving that a little lift to that area of the EQ or whatever. Or it's like, hey, I think the bass and the drum and the kick are kind of like competing with each other. I'm having a hard time like shaping this low end. That's good feedback to give to mixers or songwriters in the studio. And that has become a different part of the process when we work with a wide range of professionals and people with a lot of experience who know what they're doing and are like, I'm learning from them and knowledge sharing. But there's also people that we get who are early career, and we love to work with people who are going through this in studio process for the first time, not just in the bedroom producer environment. And that's the role that I can serve as a mastering engineer too, is just giving some feedback on like, hey, this is a little aggressive to begin with. Like the instrumental track is already kind of at mastering levels, XYZ, just notes to consider, and they can choose whether they want to go back and correct them or not. But that's, I think, a major role of the mastering engineer is just to point out things about the mix that maybe the artist didn't think about before.
Hearing you talk about this, we didn't really establish if you had an elevator pitch, what is mastering? Like, what does that mean to you? What is mastering?
Okay, so in the simplest terms, mastering is finishing the song to whatever final adjustments and distribution levels you're intending it to end up with in the final finished product of the song. You would probably know more about the history of, creating a master where it's like, well, you don't want to keep making a copy of analog recordings. So when you have a final master in analog form, you want an original source to keep making copies of, to keep making prints from. But today it's like you have a WAV file, some uncompressed format that's like, you can make as many copies of that as you want without losing fidelity. So it's like, it is mostly about like, where's it going? It's going to streaming, great. Or is it a film? Those have different relative levels that you're trying to bring it up to, and just try not to fuck it up as you reach those levels.
I'm familiar with streaming, but like film, like what is it just?
Yeah, sometimes there's different. I mean, if it's going to like YouTube, then you're basically doing a lot of the same levels as any other streaming service. But if you're doing distribution to movie theaters or broadcast, then there's different final levels that they, headroom for the true peak and those average levels. They just want in a different ballpark than music distribution.
Is there any specific songs you guys should chat about? Any I can name some off, or any ones that you remember pick into that were uniquely challenging, or maybe just like you had a good time, or tried a different mastering approach towards any of the Made on Tape catalog.
Well, I can tell you, I don't have a real particular answer to that, but it does kind of bring up two things, which are one of the things that we talked about early on too, is the aesthetic choice of whether or not to keep the analog hiss from tape recordings. And I like that by and large, even though we can get rid of a lot of that noise, that we have kept it in the mastering process. That's really cool to me. Again, just I think it's a nice aesthetic, and I think that it is a reminder of embracing the medium you're working in and not trying to correct the limitations when you're choosing to work within them.
Yeah, the hiss thing is an interesting. It's an interesting thing that can come up in my like comment section a lot. Most people are super into it and love it. I can tell there's some people from a older era. I feel a little guilty. I feel lucky that I live in 2024. Yeah, I can record on a Porta Studio, but I also have access to Isotope.
Yeah.
And all the tools of modern digital mixing and recording. So it's very powerful. I don't feel limited in that way. And there's a generation of people, not all of them, but some people from the generation who view the hiss as like a really negative thing. It was always, I could imagine in 1987 when this machine was built, you're listening to these beautiful records on the radio, immaculate sounds, and you go to record it and it's just like, it's hissy, and you're not gonna get Peter Gabriel's "So" on a Porta Studio. But now in 2024, on the flip side, it's like you just pointed out, the medium. It's the medium, like some people paint with oil, some people paint in watercolors.
Yeah.
art critics don't like watercolors. I don't know if you know that. They look very down upon it.
Well, watercolors needs to be put in its fucking place, is what I'll say. But it is, yeah. There's a retro appeal to that sound, and again, one of the interesting, maybe ironic things about being in the modern age where you can get rid of these blemishes. A lot of people want to go back and add in a vinyl crackle or some distortion or whatever to make it sound a little retro, or embrace the hiss to just be like, hey, we did this for real on analog gear. Or like film grain, people want it to be like, I want it to look like it was, like I didn't have the exposure right.
yeah. And it's kind of like the artistic technological chicken or the egg situation for many technologies. Like, I'm a bass player. Do I love the sound of the P bass because the P bass sounds fucking awesome? Or do I love the sound of the P bass because it's on so many recordings that I love?
Yeah.
So it's just something, a familiarity is a thing. So a film grain or a sound or takes you to a place, to your personal life. It's a cool thing. And ultimately, as an artist, I can't, you can't think of those things. You just do it and embrace and put it out there, and people perceive it how they perceive it.
Yes.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
I hope that made sense. My brain went from pew, 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 like not connected thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's part of the aesthetic choice is the emotional relationship or nostalgia with that sound or quality, whatever it is that we're pointing to. You might choose it because you like the sound of it. You might choose it because you like what it reminds you of, or that you recognize that it matches a standard or a norm that you are familiar with. One other thing that I will throw out there, if it's useful to you and your audience, we talked a lot about the broad picture of mastering, and I'm sure a lot of people would guess that when I first started working on your tracks, what do you call them? You call them songs? You call them tracks when it's instrumental?
I call them
records.
Tracks.
Yeah.
I usually call them tracks, which gets, even in my own brain, it's annoying because I'm like, there's 4 tracks on this track. And I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
But they're not songs.
Right. Yeah. A song it feels inherently lyrical.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my process starting to work on your tracks was all in the box. Wasn't using any analog mastering. And I was working in Logic, and I can't remember if I had like the very basic Elements Ozone from Isotope or if I had the standard Ozone. But what I was doing is I was trying to learn both what was going on in Ozone, use it for mastering, and get use the mastering assistant and kind of unpack it and see what it was doing, what the AI thought about the track, and then also try to just keep my own creative perspective intact there and be like, oh no, it's just kind of slamming it to reach, negative 14 lufs or whatever. And make adjustments that are clearly like, oh, it's not as sophisticated as we all think it is. But
you always see it tries to raise that hiss every time I see it. Like,
does it?
Yeah,
it raises the hiss.
It tries.
It lifts
when you just hit Master Assistant on Ozone, for anyone who's familiar with it, here's a screenshot. Like this, when you put in a tape recording, there's a natural roll off.
Yes.
And so
for sure. And at 10K, there's just a huge, steep drop off.
Right.
And Ozone is like, well, there should be more there, for sure. And it tries to give that lift to the high end. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't
That's
know.
so funny. Yeah. It's like, no, it's not there. It's not there, Ozone. So I was using Ozone, and I was also trying to kind of match the modules of mastering that are available in Ozone with the built-in plugins of Logic. So I would just kind of, use a multipressor or the EQ to the best of my ability to kind of mirror the stages that were going on in Ozone. I was doing that for a little while to kind of like teach and, again, reverse engineer the process. And the other thing that was really important to me in the learning curve of mastering and building my own confidence that I was making good choices and not just cookie cuttering what I thought should be done or what Ozone was telling me was right, is that I would send 2 mastering versions to you and Colin to review every time. And one of them would be the AI assistant, the mastering assistant version with minimal or no adjustments from me. And then I would do my own version separately on a different mastering track in Logic. And I would use some combination of the Logic plugins and Ozone. And I would send that to you guys in 2 different, just like V1 and V2 masters. And then sometimes you guys would pick the one that Ozone did. And I'd be like, and I would flip them every time. So it wasn't always the same numbering. But my goal was to get you guys to consistently choose my master over Ozone, which maybe isn't as hard as it sounds, but I just wanted to make sure that I was doing that.
I'm just learning about this.
Oh, yeah?
I had no idea you were doing that.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I was beating Ozone because it's tough, and the longer it goes on, too, is like it's going to get better and better. So I wanted to make sure that I was doing a better job than the AI and that you guys were choosing my work over the Ozone automatic stuff. And once you guys were consistently picking my stuff, I felt really good about that. And then I would still use the AI, the mastering assistant for some instances. If I was kind of like, what am I not hearing? I would just kind of see what it threw at me. But for the most part now, I just break out the modules, and I'm still using almost entirely Ozone for mastering. And I'm mostly just using the compression and EQ modules. I'm doing very, very little else. Sometimes noise reduction if there's a particular track that, like we were just talking about one of your more recent tracks with Privacy Club with Donnie.
Do you see yourself a liar? 'Cause you said someday.
I thought I was hearing tape hiss, but you were saying that like the reverb channel was actually giving noise.
Yeah, one of my favorite spring reverbs in our studio is the Tapco 4400. It's very noisy. It's a very noisy machine.
So, and I thought that that the tape hiss was just especially loud, but I did that master and I put some noise reduction on it, and I sent it back to you. And again, I just wanted to get your feedback, make sure you were happy with it first, and then after the fact, next time I saw you, I was like, hey, just so you know, because I know that we have made the aesthetic choice to keep the hiss in, I want to let you know that I did cut down on that track some of that noise, and then you told me that it actually wasn't from the tape. But
it might be a weird combo. I'm not.
I'm sure they're both there. But I think the reason that I noticed that it was especially loud, so that made me want to attenuate it. But anyway, the real reason I bring that up is
heard it here, folks. The hiss was reduced on one track recently.
But I just wanted to point that out because sometimes I'll use some noise reduction or. Because things are your tracks are all analog, so I don't need to add any like vibe to them most of the time. Sometimes I'll add a little stereo width or those kind of like delay effects or whatever. But usually just using EQ and compression. Sometimes if it's a really digital song and I do want to add some vibe, I'll add a little bit of reverb or delay to the whole track, just a little tiny bit to give it a little smear and a little vibe. And I'm using tools outside of Ozone for that. Nothing really mind-blowing or particular there, just grabbing a reverb or a saturator or whatever.
I didn't even know this was a technique that mastering engineers use. Just a tiny reverb on the track on the.
Yeah. I didn't like it to begin with. When I was doing research and learning and teaching myself the mastering process, that was one of the things that was fairly common, is that somewhere in a lot of people's chain is reverb. And again, I didn't really.
Is it like super short and like quiet?
Super short, super low mix percentage. If you have a mix blend knob, or super short decay, and really it is just like if it sounds too clean and you want to add a little like something to it to give it a little aesthetic and smear and vibe, then that's a good tool. Is just a tiny itty bitty reverb on the whole track, or you can cut off the low end if you please, but or again a little delay. Really,
that's a good
tidbit.
That's a good tidbit for anyone who's,
Yeah, if you're like, why does this sound so like digital? Is what it is. Like it sounds too clean. It sounds too like poppy neat. Then that can really help give a little tiny bit of vibe. And that brings us to part 2. Yeah.
Once again, thank you for watching. I hope you learned some cool stuff. James is the best. And there's cool stuff over on my Patreon or my YouTube memberships. If you're interested in supporting the channel, that would be awesome. Peace and be good to each other. Ciao.
I don't want to beat around the bush anymore here. I've mastered maybe 30, 40 tracks of yours for instrumental projects. I notice you have a lot of YouTube episodes that I haven't mastered.
Funny enough, neither have I.
All right, let's get back to this mix.
Yeah.